Welcome back, guys. This is a brand new episode from SixSq Classroom, and today we are going to wrap up our work around the NuvlaBox. During our previous two lessons, we have learned how to deploy a NuvlaBox to the edge on a Raspberry Pi and how to create a VPN credential in nuvla.io that can give us access from our local environment to an edge device running a NuvlaBox at the edge through a secure connection. So right now we are going to deploy a few extra applications to the edge to our NuvlaBox. A bit more complex, these applications. They are AI-based, but very simple still. And we are also going to explore a bit more some of the core functionalities of the NuvlaBox. So let's just click here on our training NuvlaBox and double check that we are running on a Raspberry Pi, Raspbian OS, and this is our VPN IP. We can also see the location of that NuvlaBox, the resource consumption, a list of peripherals that are attached to the Raspberry Pi, a list of events, if any, and also a list of vulnerabilities which are automatically discovered by the NuvlaBox periodically. We also have finally here a page just for sharing your NuvlaBox with other Nuvla users or groups. So to deploy our application, we first want to have a look at the peripheral list and check that there is a webcam attached to our Raspberry Pi where the NuvlaBox is running, which is a USB webcam here. It's a video and audio device. And we have a video device path on the file system that we can use to tell our application where to get the video feed from. So if we take note of this path right here and we go to the App Store, we can choose this first application here, face detection application, and you will see that we are telling our software to get the video feed from this specific device. So we are kind of binding our application to this device on the host file system. And the application itself is purely just an open source software which does some basic AI by detecting a face on a video feed and putting a square around it. So it's quite simple. And then it exposes that feed on a web server that we can access through our VPN client connection. So let's launch this application right here. As usual, we select our NuvlaBox and we can select which module, just use the latest one, and that's pretty much it. Launch. And once the application is ready, it has been deployed, as usual, we will see this AI web feed URL getting resolved. And because we have done the VPN stuff in the previous lesson, we can now just click here. We go to the VPN IP, to a random port, and here we can find our application running. And if we move, hopefully I can see my face and the green square being detected in real time. So it's quite simple. It's an open source application, again, nothing fancy, just to show how we can use the NuvlaBox information to find peripherals that we can use inside our applications. Now, let's just close this and shut down this application. What if I want to use such an AI application, but I don't want to implement the interface between my software and the USB camera? So I want something simpler. I want to abstract my code from whatever hardware is providing the video feed. Well, for such cases, we have something inside the NuvlaBox called the Data Gateway. If you have a look here at the NuvlaBox engine architecture, we will see that there's something called the Sensor Data Gateway, or simply Data Gateway, which is a component which is capable of relaying raw sensor data from these peripheral devices into your applications. And by doing so, it is abstracting the need for you to implement a native interface between your application and those peripherals. Instead, you just speak the NuvlaBox language. So in this case, since we want to relay the video feed information from the webcam to an application, we can just go back to the NuvlaBox, click on it, find the right peripheral, and in this case it's a USB webcam, again the same one, and you will see, probably you have already noticed before, there is a special action for this peripheral. And what this is saying here is that I can start routing the video feed through the NuvlaBox Data Gateway. So if we click on it, an action will be triggered, and I'm basically asking the NuvlaBox to consume this video feed for me and just give it to me in a simpler manner. And finally, we get this new line down here, which gives us an endpoint. What this is basically saying is that, well, if you don't want to implement an interface to get the video feed from the USB camera, you can just get it from this HTTP endpoint. So it's much, much simpler. The only thing you need to take care of is to make sure that your application, in order for it to be able to reach this endpoint, you need to run your application inside the same network as the NuvlaBox. Okay? And we'll see how to do this in a second. For now, let's just copy this URL. Okay? Go back to the App Store. Let's find another AI application. We have this one here, motion detector. And this one you can see through the recipe that we are defining a network for our deployment, which is making use of an external network called NuvlaBox Shared Network. Now, be reassured that this network is already there by default. Whenever you deploy the NuvlaBox engine, this network is created specifically for these purposes. So we are just inheriting this network and putting it down here into our deployment to make sure that we run within the same network scope as the NuvlaBox, and therefore we can here make use of a video source URL as our source of the video data. Okay? So if we deploy this application, launch, and select the NuvlaBox as usual, as an environment variable, I will put the link that we have copied from the NuvlaBox page. Okay? And launch. So again, this is a link that can only be accessed from within the NuvlaBox. It is not published outside that host. And to access it, you need to be running inside the same network as the NuvlaBox. And that network is called NuvlaBox-shared-network. As simple as that. So once this application has been started and the containers inside start running, we will see, again as usual, the URL being resolved. And again, because we have the VPN client already configured, I can just click on it and we will see the new application running with a new web feed and a new AI application, the execution being done on the Raspberry Pi, on the NuvlaBox, but this time fetching the video data from the data gateway. So let's just click on it. And there we go. It's pretty much the same, but just a different AI algorithm. Okay, again, it's an open source thing. We are just repackaging it just for this demonstration, but the video feed is being taken from the data gateway, okay, from that HTTP URL, which is much simpler for some applications. If you don't want to use it, just disable it and use the video device directly as we have done before. Okay, so let's just stop it. Okay, and the same way we have enabled it, we can also go back to the NuvlaBox and disable on the peripherals the data gateway relaying for this USB camera. Okay. Now, what else can you do with this? The data gateway works for USB cameras, as you have seen. It relays the video feed through an HTTP endpoint, but you can do more than that. If you go back to resource consumption, one of the cool things you can do with the data gateway is the ability to subscribe to an MQTT endpoint, to a topic which is running inside the data gateway, where you can get all of this information that you can see here on your dashboard. So let's say you want to run an application that accesses the CPU consumption or the memory consumption of your NuvlaBox, right? You don't need to get that from Nuvla, you can get that from inside the NuvlaBox as well. And the numbers will be exactly the same as the ones you see here in the dashboard. So if, for example, we focus on the CPU consumption, So here you have the topic name that you have to subscribe to and an example of how the raw data looks like. Okay, this is the same data that we get in Nuvla, right? And it is also available from inside the NuvlaBox in the data gateway by default. So when you install the NuvlaBox engine, this mechanism is triggered by default. There's no need to enable anything here. This is a special feature for the NuvlaBox, is the ability to get the telemetry from inside the NuvlaBox through MQTT. So let's try it out. This time, let's build our own application for this. So go to your project, add application. Okay, let's call it something. Let's call it a data gateway, telemetry fetch. Okay, example app of the gateway telemetry fetch. And let's write our compose file. I'm doing this with Docker. You can do it with Kubernetes if you want. Services. And let's call our service, whatever, just the fetcher. Let's use something simple like an Alpine image, all right? And let's define an environment where we can pass a topic name. Okay, and now what we have to do, for example, because it's an Alpine image, let's just make sure we install the Mosquito clients, and we subscribe to a topic on this host data gateway. Remember, the name is always the same. The data gateway is something which can be found internally from inside a NuvlaBox through this DNS name. So it's quite simple, nothing fancy. The name is always the same. Data gateway with or without the hyphen, it's up to you. And the topic will be the one defined through the environment variable. Okay. Now, what else do I need? I need a network. And it's that NuvlaBox network. Do you remember that we have to import? So let's define it here. Networks. NuvlaBox shared network, which is already there. We are just inheriting it. There you go. And that's pretty much it, right? So just to recap, we are taking the existing NuvlaBox shared network from our NuvlaBox engine installation, right? And we are putting it here. Let's actually rename this. It's another way you can do it. You can rename this guy just to make it simpler. And here you can name it to the actual NuvlaBox shared network. So we are bringing in the NuvlaBox shared network into our application, making sure that our Alpine container is connected to it, right? And then we are just simply running a very simple instruction inside just to install the Mosquito client and then subscribe to the desired topic on the NuvlaBox Data Gateway, which is there again by default, right? So that's pretty much it. We can just save this for now. And don't forget to define here the environment variable. Okay, no default, which topic, but let's make it required. Okay, we don't need a URL for this application. Let's just save it. Okay, MQTT fetch. And let's try to deploy this. So again, select our NuvlaBox, environment variables, the topic that we want. Let's say we want the CPU telemetry, and launch. So again, as usual, we are starting our application. This time we don't have a URL mapping because it is not a web-based application, but it's a sort of standalone job. It's a container running something inside. So the way to actually look at the output is to stream the logs from that container. So we can come here, start streaming, and we shall see the Mosquito clients being installed, and then it subscribes to that topic inside the data gateway, and we already got our first message there. And every time we get telemetry, which by default on the NuvlaBox is every 30 seconds, we will get it from inside the NuvlaBox. Okay? So again, let's wait one more time. After a few seconds, we get another message here. And these are the values, by the way, which are flowing into nuvla.io and then filling in those nice plots that we see from the NuvlaBox page. Okay? So now, for example, let's say I want to see other kinds of telemetry, or I want to actually get all the telemetry, not just CPU or memory or disk. I want to get the full NuvlaBox status where all the resource consumption is in one go. Okay? There's one way you can do that, and you do that by updating, or you can relaunch as well your application. And this time the topic, let's use the NuvlaBox status topic and update. So basically your application will be restarted, but this time with a different environment variable, which will point our Mosquito subscriber to a different topic inside the same data gateway MQTT broker. Okay? So let's start looking at the logs again. This time we'll see the container restarted here and reinstall the Mosquito client, and is about to subscribe to a different topic in the same data gateway, and there we go. This time we get a very different message, a lot longer, but with all those same metrics inside, not just for CPU, but for memory as well, for disk, for network, you name it. It's a very long telemetry data point, but it is the same one that you can get from the API in nuvla.io. You just get it from the data gateway instead, so it's much faster, and you get it on a publisher subscription mechanism. Okay? And that's pretty much it for the data gateway, right, guys? So please practice this. If you have questions, just on the comments or via email, just send them to us. And if you want to see other metrics there as well, you can ask us for those metrics. For now, that's all for the NuvlaBox Data Gateway and how to deploy AI into the edge for your NuvlaBoxes. Okay? So I hope you have enjoyed this one. Stay tuned for the next episode, and I'll see you then. Cheers!